get you more on that story, bring in the Teddy Bear Clinic Executive Director, Dr. Shaheda Omar. Dr. Omar, good to have your time tonight. So, and at this point, it just feels as though the horrors committed against children in this country, they just don't seem to cease.
Unfortunately not. This is a real tragedy. Another child, another life lost. And it's actually, one cannot even begin to justify what the family is asking for justice, because it's the systems that have failed this child. The systems have actually enabled this child to suffer and to come to a tragic loss and ending. And I think we've had this conversation before. We have the best policies and legislation in place. It's the implementation. There's standard operating procedures. There's protocols in place. And here, despite all those pieces in place, the professionals have failed to respond appropriately, adequately, and timelessly. And as a result, we are faced with this tragic loss of a 12-year-old child.
And what we're told is that Sibusiso got into a fight on the day in question. There was then a point to which he was taken aside by staff at the school. And I want to read you one of the quotes that we heard today, that the boys were sent to reception. That's when one of the teachers met up with Sibusiso, and in his own version, he conceded that he reprimanded the boy. According to the MEC, he was reprimanded for his, quote, gay tendencies and told to leave them outside the school gate. That speaks to adults, teachers who are supposed to be taking care of all children, bringing their own hatred, their own prejudices onto school grounds. How do we deal with that effectively?
Indeed, and I think if we look at the Children's Act, it speaks to promoting the best interests of the child. The South African Schools Act also looks at protection and safety of the child. So what we are looking at here is that this teacher was shielded. If the 4 people that have been implicated or that are going to face disciplinary measures, there was definitely complacency and, of course, people being complicit and complacent and not following procedure. And as a result of that, because this constitutes not only emotional abuse, the lack of sensitivity, the discrimination, biased values imposed, inflicted, and wounding this child deeply. So what we need to realize is that the educator failed this child, bringing in his own personal values, which is not part of an educator's role or responsibility. The role is to educate, to protect, and ensure to advance the rights of children within the school context.
So at this point, all these members of staff at this primary school have been referred, as per the recommendations, to a disciplinary process. Should the family not pursue perhaps further action outside of that process? I don't know if there's even an option legally to pursue other more serious action against them.
Well, I am certain that the family will be able to access some legal support. There are pro bono legal, there's pro bono legal aid, and there are other resources that could actually support the family. And I think the family needs to leave its options open at this point in time. But I think we also need to commend the MEC for taking up this challenge and addressing it, and now holding people accountable, because it's about being transparent, accountable, and people that have been responsible in failing to protect this child have been obviously brought to the front, where they are going to have to face certain disciplinary measures, as the MEC has alluded to. But I also want to add to what the MEC spoke to in terms of the recommendations, that if we look at the structures within the school system or educational institutions, training needs to be carried out on different levels. The school-based support team, the school management team, the school governing body, and we also need to include all our supporting staff in terms of training, understanding, identifying, management, and reporting, because this is clearly a classic example of failure to report. The obligation to report is mandatory, and everybody in this equation, within this context, failed this child.
I wonder though, Dr. Omar, if training can undo something that appears as deep-rooted as an educator saying to a little boy, you basically need to leave your, quote, gay tendencies at the gate, which is homophobic bullying as it was characterized today. Would training even change a person such as that? Because clearly what happened here was so awful that this little boy felt he could not live any longer.
Indeed, this little boy was trapped, was immobilized, was hurt, humiliated, was shamed, blamed, named. And I think you are absolutely correct. Training cannot change this. But by training, awareness raising, conscientizing, and consequence management, where actions have consequences, and zero tolerance for this kind of conduct would certainly deter potential offences of this nature, potential disasters and catastrophic endings of children in this fashion.
What's also unfortunate, Dr. Omar, is that whenever we talk about instances of child abuse, whether in the home or at school, whether it's pupil-on-pupil violence, or in this instance where an educator and, in fact, a group of staff have been implicated, linked to the death of a child in this way, that we treat it as an event. There's outrage for a day or two, a week, a month, then we seem to move on. Should there not be a complete overhaul of the school system to make sure that we don't have instances such as this, and that where there are cases, they are dealt with transparently and fairly?
You are absolutely correct. Of course, this needs to be addressed urgently. I hear what the MEC has said, that it's school holidays looming, but that doesn't prevent us from putting things into motion and starting the new year, and to escalate it to the Department of Basic Education, where the policies and procedures and pieces of legislation are, firstly ensure that people are trained on it, understand it, implement it, and that there would be consequence management if people fail to act on it accordingly and appropriately. So that is something that needs to be done. It needs to be actually part of strategic planning now for the new year, and it's got to be implemented immediately in the new year. We cannot afford to lose another child. Because systems fail the child and the family. And I think what...
Please finish your point, ma'am. Apologies.
I just think that not only do this deceased child's family need debriefing, but it's the whole school environment. Anybody that is affiliated or associated with this learner would require support, counseling, and intervention.
Right. Dr. Shaheda Omar, Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children, from the Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children, speaking to us tonight. Thank you so much.